Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, has accused Saudi Arabia of engaging in proxy wars in the Middle East. The Guardian newspaper has published footage in which Mr Johnson says Saudi Arabia and Iran are puppeteering in various conflicts in the region. He was speaking at a conference in Rome last week. Let's have a listen.
There are politicians who are twisting and abusing religion and different strains of the same religion in order to further their own political objectives. And that's one of the biggest problems in the whole, political problems in the whole region. And the tragedy for me, and that's why you have these proxy wars being fought the whole time in that area, is that there's not strong enough leadership in the countries themselves. You've got the Saudis, the Iran, everybody moving in and puppeteering and playing proxy wars, and it's a tragedy to watch it. We need to have some way of encouraging visionary leadership.
Boris Johnson there. Well, Paul Mason, you must be delighted that the Foreign Secretary agrees with you.
Substantially, I think he is right. But of course, if you listen to the whole clip there, there's two huge bloopers in it. One is to diss the UK's strategic ally in the region. Remembering, we are building a Royal Navy base in the Gulf in Bahrain to support Saudi Arabia in its proxy war in Yemen and the rest. The other thing is this weird notion that the Sunni-Shia conflict in the Middle East is somehow the product of what he calls politicians who don't display leadership. I mean, it's a fundamental fault line that does he not have officials over there in the Foreign Office, a beautiful sort of marbled hall? Was there nobody there saying to him, Boris, you're going to speak about the Middle East, we have one ally, what's going on in the Foreign Office?
Well, you're not the only one putting that question, because the Prime Minister's spokesperson has, in the last sort of half an hour or so, responding to the comments from the Foreign Secretary, has said that Theresa May wants to strengthen the relationship with Saudi Arabia. She said, we are supporting the Saudi-led coalition in support of the legitimate government in Yemen against Houthi rebels. She said, those are the Prime Minister's views. The Foreign Secretary's views are not the government's position on, for example, Saudi Arabia and its role in the region. Now, if that's not a slapdown, I don't know what is. And,
you know, I mean, everybody who speaks in public has an off day, but the clip there seemed to Boris Johnson seemed to be pulling these ideas almost out of a spontaneous wellspring of new ideas that were coming to him.
A stream of consciousness.
Yes, I think that's the word for it. No, I think the substantive problem here is that the May administration has inherited what I think is a very bad combined foreign and defence strategy in the Middle East. That is, it's got this thing about global reach. To have global reach, you need a base in Bahrain. You need the Saudis buying your fighters. And after Trump, with the falling apart of globalisation, what does this mean? I would have liked to hear Boris Johnson talk about that. I mean, and I think he probably does want to talk about that.
I'm sure he does, but at the moment there is now two different positions. There is Theresa May and the government's position, and there is the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson's position.
As we'll find out, this pervades the government. It has divided positions on many things, including Brexit, which we're about to talk about. But I think, you know, Britain, as an old imperial power with responsibilities around the world, needs its diplomatic service to be able to feed into the Foreign Office what is actually going on. If you have a policy, you either stick to it or you change it. And you need competence. And I am, not for the first time, one finds oneself saying about Boris Johnson that the man is not competent to do this job.
Right, well then, in terms of you either change the policies or you stick to it, the spokesperson for the Prime Minister said the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, will be in the region this weekend. And that will be an opportunity for him to set the government's position on relations with Saudi Arabia and others in the region, rather than his own, presumably. And asked whether the Prime Minister had full confidence in Mr Johnson as Foreign Secretary, the spokeswoman said yes. It's come to something fairly early on, isn't it, when you're questioning whether the Foreign Secretary or the Prime Minister still has confidence in her Foreign Secretary?
And there's no need for Mr. Johnson to be picking this fight or this sort of inadvertent stumble over Saudi. It's not the substantive issue that the government is trying to deal with. You know, the Iran deal will be blown up when Trump becomes president. We need our diplomatic service on the case and our foreign secretary on the case in the Middle East to try and work out how we can save, because we're still part of the European Union, which has signed a deal with Iran, this peacemaking deal in the Gulf, because nobody wants a nuclear armed war between these two powers across the Persian Gulf.
I wonder how emotions are running in the Foreign Office at the moment.
I think the problem for yourself there is that he speaks as a pundit. I mean, I could
As a
have been asked a
journalist.
question like that in the Gulf, where I go regularly, and I could have said that. But he's not a pundit. He's the Foreign Secretary, and it changes everything. So.
And we've just had this vote in Parliament where the opposition tried to defeat them on arming the Saudis. And what does this sound like? The Saudis, look at it and they say the British political establishment is not very keen on us at the moment.
No, well, I think they might have taken that away from those comments.